You got it? You ready?
Yes.
All right. So good evening again to the audience at home on the recording. My name is Robert Thompson, the newest member of the Laguna Beach Police Department. Very proud and humbled to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening. COVID has made it increasingly difficult to make the connections with the people in the community that I so desperately need right now to give me the context I need to sort of take the information that I'm gathering internally and synthesize it in a way that makes sense, both for me to understand the police department's operation, but more importantly, to understand what the community wants from its police department. I certainly won't bore you with my life story, but very quickly, I am from St. Louis, Missouri. Grew up there. Family is all from there, still there. I'm the only expat living abroad outside of the state of Missouri. I was a police officer. I started in 1994 at St. Louis Police Department, and after 9/11 joined the FBI. I was assigned to Sacramento out of my training in Quantico. Once I figured out on a map where Sacramento was, I was able to report for duty and spent 15 years in the Sacramento field office, leaving as a supervisory special agent in charge of our surveillance and aviation section and our special operations group. I became the police chief in Dixon, California, which is a town halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco, and was just a clam there until my wife informed me that she moved 1,900 miles for me, moving from St. Louis to Sacramento, and she needed to know if I could move to Southern California for her. She runs an office in Irvine, and her company was spending about $70,000 a year for her to commute. So I was in the O column when it comes to moving. We were frequent, because of her time in Orange County, we were frequent visitors to Laguna Beach, my children and I, as tourists. I probably shouldn't say that too loudly because I understand people in Laguna have feelings about tourists, but I was one nonetheless and became very enamored with the town. And when I saw the police chief opening, thought it to be a unique opportunity that I wanted to take advantage of. Put in for it and managed to snake my way through the process. And I sit before you today very humbled and grateful at the opportunity. So understanding sort of my non-traditional career trajectory, taking me a very long circuitous route through the federal service, I think that we talk about what, people have asked, what is your vision for the police department? What is your philosophy? And I'm happy to discuss that, kind of in the abstract, but I do think it's important when you have a community like Laguna Beach that enjoys a very low violent crime rate. Certainly compared to other cities in our region, we do very, very well in crime overall, but exceptionally well in violent crime. And so I think it begs the question, not so much what do I see as my vision for the police department, but what do you see as the vision for the police department? What do the people that live here want from their police department? What do they feel that they need, both to sleep peaceably in their homes as well as enjoy their quality of life? Because that appears to be the bigger challenge in Laguna Beach, is not necessarily combating crime, it's combating the perception of crime, it's combating bad information that gets out in the wild about things that are either inaccurate or incorrect. And it gives people a sense of disquieting in their own homes. And so COVID has inhibited my ability to get in front of groups like this, to hear from the community, kind of what is it that you want from your police department? What activities are important for you, for us to address? What quality of life issues are challenging for you in your neighborhoods that might be inhibiting your ability to fully enjoy what the city has to offer? And then within the limits of the law, within the limits of policy, how do we create what this city wants for its department? What I want for the police department is important from a philosophical standpoint, but what you want from your police department is more impactful from your day-to-day, living the life of someone in the city. And what impacts do crime and traffic and visitors have on you and your neighborhoods? And how do we help address that? And so I've just barely been here 2 months. So I will admit that any analysis I'm making is rudimentary, but I think we are seeing things where we need to better align the department's resources with the community's expectations, specifically as it relates to some of our professional staff programs like Beach Patrol and our parking services program, I think that there has been over time the demand to want to do more things to address these issues more robustly, quality of life issues, I mean. And we are at an inflection point now where we need to take a moment and are we properly aligning our resources with the needs of the community? So in a very general sense, again, we enjoy a very low crime rate in Laguna. I think that is something the community should take great comfort in and be proud of. Likewise, I think we have the 6.5 million visitors a year that compel the police department and indeed all city departments to punch well above their weight class. This is not a city of 6 million people, but we police a population of tens of thousands, or depending on a particular day or time of year, hundreds of thousands of people that are in and around the city that all have placed demands on police services. And so how do we do this in a way that makes sense, but doesn't betray sort of our core responsibility to provide for the public trust and public safety? And that is a challenge because when you look at the census sheet, it's a city of 20,000+ people, not dissimilar from where I came from. But if you looked around the city as I did on a tourist in early July, it does not look like a city of 20,000 people. And so all the demands commensurate with an influx of population of a city 3, 4, 5 times that size are the reality that the police department has to deal with. And then at the end of the day, when those day trippers go home, what are we left with in our city and the people here that we're supposed to protect? And so staffing is a constant challenge because, you know, hiring a police officer is an 8 to 12 month process to get them hired and trained and out on their own. So it's not a seasonal thing. You can't hire a police officer just for the summer. So what is the right number of people we need in the right places to provide the level of service that you as the community demand and expect, that also lives within our means, because police officers are expensive. And so if we're going to have them, do we have them working in the right times and the right places for all that to make sense? So I don't know if that helps from kind of the overarching part, Mr. Mondo, or if I've put everybody to sleep, or that was more than you asked for. So give me some direction and I'll type it in.
No, I think that's a great overview, and I appreciate that broad view and the challenges of dealing with, and everybody I think is aware that yes, we have like about 24,000 people here in town, and our population just explodes in the summer with folks coming in. That creates some additional problems. So I think one of the questions that we have is the question of the homeless, and it's a tricky one. It's a legal one. So I'm curious as to what you see that might be helpful to the residents with respect to the homeless, and then I have some other questions which have just popped up.
Certainly. So let me make and I thank you for that, because I was giving you sort of my philosophical bent, and I need to expand that as it relates to homelessness. Homelessness is not a problem we are going to arrest our way out of. I think we need to debase ourselves of the idea that being homeless is not a crime in this state. It is not a criminal offense. It is not something that jail is going to solve. And while we may agree or disagree with that from a philosophical standpoint, the legal portion of this is not ambiguous. It is clear, patently clear, as the city has been on the receiving end of a couple lawsuits, that the police interaction with the homeless community has to be one about programming and services. We need to create as many pathways to reduce or eliminate the underlying conditions that cause homelessness as we can, recognizing there will always be a group of program resistant people in our population that make that increasingly challenging. Having said that, the community outreach officers, partially funded by Measure LL, are what I think are a very good first attempt to have sustained and continued interaction with members of that community, so that we are able to, on a constant basis, on a continual basis, attempt to offer services and programs that may help somebody leave that lifestyle. For some people, being homeless is a choice. We understand that. There is no law against it. There are laws against the ancillary activities that homelessness can cause. And so where we can find the opportunity to align people with programs, we want to do that, because we find that is the most successful way to eliminate the constellation of issues that comes up with. The alternative sleeping location, mental health services, drug rehabilitation, alcohol treatment programs. We partner with Orange County and their mental health teams and to provide those services to people that want them, but we can't compel people to participate in those programs. So having a source of constant communication and contact with the members of our homeless community that are program resistant afford us the best outcomes when it comes to involving the criminal justice process. We had, Project Homecoming, where if someone is homeless and they live in Michigan, connecting them with people back in Michigan and getting them on a bus back to Michigan helps hopefully restore some balance and symmetry, but also reduces the problem we have here locally. So we think this is an all hands on deck approach. It's not just our community outreach officers' problem to deal with. It's everyone in the police department, but it's also our public works department when it comes to dealing with facilities. It's our code enforcement department when it comes to nuisance activity. And so we're often the tip of the spear as it relates to homelessness, but by no means are we the alpha and the omega when it comes to dealing with this. I think, though, the takeaway I would ask you and your group to remember, as frustrating as it is, we are bound by court cases and laws about what we can do. So it may be disagreeable to us. It may be outside of what makes us comfortable in our community, but in and of itself, being homeless is not illegal. And so where we can reduce the number of situations where we find officers in conflict with people that perhaps have mental health problems. If you've been following the news in 2020, policing is a lot more complicated in America than it was even 2 years ago. We have to be sensitive to that. And we also have to be cognizant of the laws and the processes that deal with it. So we think of it as an all hands on deck approach. There's a very long answer to your very short question.
Well, it's a complicated question, so I don't think there is a short answer to it. So I appreciate you going into some detail. We do have something that's popped up on our chat room, and it's kind of a two-part question. One is it's what you've already covered is what's your plan to deal with the homeless population in Laguna Beach, and that is you have to operate within the laws that are available, and there is no crime in being homeless, but there may be a crime in doing some other things that the homeless engage in, if I summarize that properly. And then there's a question that popped up here that says, do you plan to continue the aggressive crackdown on DUIs? And so it's not a homeless question, but it's a question that has popped up.
The short answer is yes. And I would say that this has nothing to do with me. Upon my arrival in Laguna Beach, and when I started, kind of following our daily tracker of the previous activity, the previous shift's activity, I was surprised, even in a COVID lockdown environment, the pace at which officers in this jurisdiction arrest people for DUI. It's a very serious problem, but it's one that the police department takes very seriously pre-me. So there's something culturally within our organization that officers make a tremendous number of DUI arrests. And this is before bars are open. So if you sort of think of the current state we're in right now, where bars that don't serve food are not open, we are looking for how are we going to deal with these things in the summer. And part of this is doing a very data-driven analysis for when we deploy officers, what details we deploy officers on. Do we look at expanding our traffic safety program, which is specifically about speed and drug and alcohol, motor vehicle operation? This is all kind of part of the analysis that I'm conducting right now in concert with these community groups like this, because we do have community groups that say we spend too much time on South Coast Highway policing drunks. We don't spend enough time driving around neighborhoods and doing that stuff. So there are competing interests within our city that we have to deal with, be they traffic related issues like speed, drug enforcement. I know there's a very strong a sentiment in this community about loud vehicles, be they loud exhaust or engines, modified engines. And there's another great example of where we are restricted by the law. We've worked with a lobbyist to try to introduce legislation to make those loud exhaust citations meaningful. Right now, they're not. They're not a meaningful citation. We've yet to been able to find a member of the assembly locally that would help us sponsor legislation to address this problem. So there's another example of where we're working within the confines of the law on something we think is important. Obviously, the DUI speeding for the safety of our community, but the loud exhaust and modified engines for the comfort of our community. And so again, everyone in the organization is responsible for those things, but we do have finite resources, and those resources are often in competition with one another for our time. So my job is to try to figure out what's the right amount to have working at the right time to deal with the right issue, and ultimately your job to hold me accountable on how well I do or don't do those things.
One of the other questions that has come up is traffic, which you touched on. And I guess, I don't know that there's any magic bullet for traffic, but have you been able to look at any of the new patterns, and especially with the with Forest Avenue being a walking zone now, which I happen to like, but be that as it may. And is there some analysis that you can do that might help us with traffic in this town, and especially now that we have the construction going on down by Main Beach, if you will, on PCH?
Well, let me tell you, everybody on the line right now, warning, warning, danger, danger, right? Like I'm telling you now, we're telling everybody to tell 10 friends that Coast Highway is going to be majorly impacted over the next 2 months. We've tried to message this out. It is going to be the superseding traffic event, Carmageddon, until we're finished with it. I happen to know in my short time here, it is a necessary project. It is critically necessary to help us deal with flooding in the city, so it must be done. Unfortunately, there's going to come a point here in the next couple of weeks where Coast Highway is going to be closed entirely overnight for them to get this project started, and then we'll be reduced to 1 lane in each direction for 2 months. They're going to work 7 days a week. We've augmented this program with traffic flaggers of our own to try to deal with traffic control patterns. We've set up city traffic cameras that you as the public can log in and look at yourself to see what the flow is going to be. But until we get through this event, it'll be difficult to do any meaningful traffic analysis because it's so disruptive. And so I'd like to circle back with you and your group, hopefully in person one day in the coming couple of months, to be able to get through this and say, here's kind of what we're looking at from a flow perspective. I will tell you that when it comes to traffic flow, that's a public works issue because it's an engineering issue. The police department deals with traffic violations and things like that, but we don't deal with traffic flow. We work in concert with public works, but I'm not trying to kick the can on that one. I just want to be upfront that there are things we can control and there are things we can't. And traffic design and management is part of our engineering department.
We have a question that just came in, and it has to do with, do we know the hours that PCH work will be going on? Is it a 24/7 situation?
It's
or
not
other hours?
24/7. It's not 24/7 because there are the residents who live in that area. And so again, competing interests. There's one interest that says we want this project done as quickly as possible with minimal traffic disruption. And then there are competing interests that say, I live down here and I don't want to hear jackhammers all night for 2 months. So I believe construction is going to run, don't quote me on this, although you should be able to, I apologize. It's at least 12 or 14 hours a day, starting at the 6, 7 o'clock range till 6, 7 o'clock at night, every day, 7 days a week until the project is completed. And there will be 2 instances I'm aware of where South Coast Highway will be closed entirely from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. while they do the prep work underground. And that is going to necessitate a complete detour down Ocean, completely around the affected area by Main Beach. And so we want to get that word out to as many people as we can because we want to mitigate as much as we can.
Thank you. some of the other questions that have popped up that I'm reading. South Laguna people always have a question about parking. And is that something that falls under the police department, or is that going to be, does that fall under a different department?
No, parking enforcement is the police department.
Is there something that could make it better for the folks in South Laguna?
It's a complicated question because, you know, as many of you that live here know, the Coastal Commission has a significant amount of influence over what we can and can't do in beachfront communities. And so one of the most effective tools that we would be used to deal with parking, which would be a resident parking program, is not something the Coastal Commission is inclined to entertain. So the greatest weapon in combating these traffic flow parking issues is not available to us in coastal communities because of the Coastal Commission, without commensurate offsets in parking. So if we built a 3-story parking structure somewhere in South Laguna that was for public parking, arguably we would be able to, conceivably, don't quote me on this, literally guys, 2 months here, so bear with me. But my understanding is we could go to the Coastal Commission and say, look, we have provided adequate public parking to access the beaches. So we want to implement some parking programs like restricted parking to residents or something like that. But absent those offsets, the Coastal Commission is not inclined to allow us to impose those restrictions on communities within their jurisdiction. And so that really is the big hammer. Absent that, the thing that people don't like to hear, but I feel compelled to say nonetheless, is a visitor parking in front of your house legally is still legally parked. It may be inconvenient, it may be upsetting, it may be frustrating, but there's nothing we can do about it. Calling the police about a vehicle that's legally parked, it's been there less than 72 hours, is not anything we can enforce, absent an additional restriction, like they're parked in a red zone or in a permitted area, but simply parked on the street, on a public street in front of your house, there is no violation with that. And so I know people get frustrated. I can appreciate it. I myself would get frustrated by that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's not illegal. And so that frustration is compounded when you say, well, the cops aren't doing anything. There's nothing the cops can do. There is no law violation with that. And until we get unshackled by the Coastal Commission, there are limits to what we can do. So illegally parked vehicles we deal with aggressively. We've got the numbers to back that up. People that are parked in violations of signs or restrictions, we deal with aggressively. But people who annoy you because of where they park, as sympathetic as I am, it's not enforceable or actionable. And that's across the entire city, not just South Laguna, although I have become very familiar with the term South Laguna surge. I've heard it many times. I'm sympathetic to it. It's not to say that we're giving it away or that we're not work towards it, but I just want to have realistic expectations about what we can and can't do.
I've got a question that popped up here, and I'm just trying to see if I can read it properly. It says next door, which is I believe you know what that is. It's a community of people that talk to each other. And it's
painfully aware of next door, yes.
It doesn't seem to, the way it's written, I can't quite see that it makes a lot of sense. So if whoever wrote that would rephrase it. And it's, here's another one that seems to fit better. Is there any thought to increasing the number of police in South Laguna?
I'd love to just get the council to approve those officers, and I'll take as many as you're willing to give me. We do have a beat system that's drawn up was drawn up geographically to divide the city based on the workload, but also to compartmentalize, like South Laguna has an officer in our beat system that is assigned to that area. But again, there are a finite number of officers working at any given time. And while they're primarily responsible for handling calls for service in their areas, they will frequently get called out of their areas. And so part of what I think we as a community need to do, I need to do is in your police department is, do we have the right number? Do we have too many? Do we not have enough? And then living within our means, what can we afford to pay for? Now, you might have heard some talk about our trying to stand up a neighborhood improvement program, which within the police department means the creation of neighborhood services specialists. And so we're looking at taking the parking service position, the beach patrol officer position, and getting it out of its silos and creating a neighborhood services position within the department that would be supervised by police personnel. And these would be teams that would be able to address hyper-local quality of life issues. So your particular neighborhood is having a parking problem, a traffic flow problem, a crime problem. These teams would exist outside of the normal patrol staffing. And so they could provide kind of continued and sustained efforts. Whereas right now, if we're doing it with patrol officers, they may be called away over the course of days or weeks multiple times. And so we're not getting the sustained impact that I think people need to deal with these quality of life issues. So not only for South Laguna, but for the entire city, these neighborhood services teams would be kind of a first prong in our attempt to deal with the crime and quality of life issues. It's coming, it's being developed right now. It is not South Laguna specific, but I believe South Laguna is a perfect beneficiary for this program.
So one of the things that I was reading about you, very commendable, because I happen, it's just something that makes a lot of sense, is that I believe it had to do with the ongoing training of police officers, and this new program that you're talking about would seem that that would be a perfect place to have some training go on for, because it's somewhat unique to what's being done right now. Does that make any sense? Maybe not.
It does, and a great example is taking things that are unique to us in our town and creating things that don't already exist. I'll give you a great example. The Beach Patrol Officer Program, which is very popular in this community, was a seasonal program done by people in their late teens during the summer months. And summer months used to mean June to August. Well, over the course of time, those became full-time positions. That program expanded. You know, our summer crowd doesn't come in June anymore. They're coming in May, and they're staying till September. And so over time, what we have asked those beach patrol officers to do has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they spend less time on the beaches, and they spend more time at trailheads and parks and other places where the community is demanding additional resources. And so what we've got to do now is create a position that is properly equipped and trained to do the range of things that this community wants. That doesn't exist anywhere else. There are no other beach patrol programs in Southern California, to my knowledge, but certainly in Orange County, that are staffed by non-sworn police personnel. We are the only jurisdiction that uses civilians for that enforcement type of activity. And if we're going to do that, we are going to have to change how they're trained and how they're equipped, or they are going to have to do less when it comes to enforcement, because we are creating situations where we're putting staff members in positions they are not trained or equipped to deal with safely. And my primary concern is the safety of the people in this community, but that also means the safety of the police personnel. So we've got to change our training and the equipping to do what the community wants them to do, or we have to do it differently. But we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it.
Well, it is a challenge. It's been a challenge for as many years as I've lived in Laguna Beach, and it is one that I think requires probably some new ideas. And I don't know what those new ideas are, but I think you probably have a good feel for it. I do have another question here, and let me just see if I can. It's a little bit. I'm not sure that this is anything that you would have any way of knowing. It has something to do with, given what's going on the border, do you see any issues that's created for us here in Laguna Beach?
None whatsoever.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but nice to hear it from you. Thank you.
No ancillary issues to that at all.
And then another question is, what are the lessons that you learned from Dixon that you can apply directly to Laguna Beach?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think one of the things we did very effectively in Dixon was a little bit what I alluded to earlier. which is taking the temperature of the community to determine what do they want from their police department, and then aligning our services to match that where it's possible. And so I think we did that exceptionally well in Dixon. In Dixon, we had a 78% approval rating pre-2020. 2020 is always going to change things. And the fire department had an 82% approval rating. So anytime cops can be 4% behind the firemen, because, you know, firemen are America's heroes, you can just ask them. It's important to be able to say that we are effectively engaging with our community in meaningful and impactful ways. And so, you know, Laguna has some unique programs, I think, that are exceptionally well positioned to do that. The community outreach officers are one of them. This neighborhood improvement team that we're putting together is going to put police officers in charge of these new versions of the BPOs and the parking services people. And so these are teams that are going to be able to directly interface at a very, very hyper local level with problems that might exist only on one street or in one particular neighborhood in a way that we're not able to do right now. And so I think the lesson I took away from Dixon was like Laguna, it was a community very, very supportive of law enforcement. And the officers and people that work here know that. And these are difficult times. This is a hard time to be a cop in America. We see a number of our applicants are withdrawing from the process, saying, you know what, I thought it over. I don't want to do this. I had an applicant the other day tell me, I talked to my mom and she said, nope, you're not being a cop, not now. And so we want to get the right people in this town. We don't need a town of gunslingers. And so you got to arrange what your police force looks like and acts like to what the community wants. We did that successfully up north. I'm convinced we can do it down here. In fact, I'm convinced the community down here demands it. And as you should, to have an organization that reflects the values of the community that we work in.
I think that's a rather complete answer, and do appreciate it. And I think the entire town looks forward to seeing how these things turn out as you actually get involved in the day-to-day, more than just with the 2 months on the job, which is a challenge for anybody. So those are very, very complete answers, and I thank you for that. I think that unless more questions pop up, well, maybe there's another one that just did.
Great.
And it's a question. It says, so is a beat officer similar to a neighborhood community officer? It seems like a great idea to know our local neighborhood officer.
So yes and no. A beat officer is an officer assigned to patrol who is responsible to patrol a specific geographic area in the city, but is also going to be compelled to leave their beat. Like if we get a call that requires 2 officers, we have, you know, we don't have enough people out there that beat officer is not going to be assigned to go do something else. The neighborhood services program we're looking to put together would be outside of the patrol apparatus. So they wouldn't be responding to calls for service. They would be able to devote time, attention, and energy to specific problems that specific parts of our town are having and deal with them on a constant and sustained basis until they're resolved. We don't have that capability right now. That's part of the new program the city is putting together. It's a capability that we need, I think, because Laguna is a town primarily focused on quality of life issues. That's not to say we don't have serious crime here. Hey, 2 weeks ago today, we had a critical incident in our town, I think most of you know about, that it can happen here. And our police officers have to be trained and equipped to deal with those situations. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality. But that is not the rule in Laguna, that is the exception. And so our responsibility is to how do we create and sustain ways where people feel like, hey, I have a problem in my neighborhood, the police are listening to me, I'm seeing action, deal with it, and ultimately it resolves. And so the nomenclature is not as important of what we call them as the idea behind you have a group of officers that when you call 911, they're the ones that are going to show up. Versus a different group of personnel that when you call and say, I'm having a problem with this, that, or that, not in the moment, not an emergency, not something that requires an immediate response, there's a team that we can assign that's going to stay with that, with you and with that problem until it's resolved. So if you think about it in those camps, what we call them is less important than what they do.
And just a clarification, the neighborhood community officer is a sworn officer.
So it's a team. So the plan is to have a sworn officer, a corporal, in charge of a team of what are going to be called neighborhood services specialists. And the neighborhood services specialist jobs are primarily going to be repurposed from the current parking services officers and the beach patrol officers. We're going to create something new that does what we think the community wants it to be able to do, and have those people on teams so that they're accessible 7 days a week on teams that are being dispatched and assigned to neighborhood problems. So it'll be a combination of sworn police officers and non-sworn professional staff that have specific capabilities like parking enforcement, traffic control, or quality of life nuisance issues.
Given this program, which sounds very, very encouraging, of course I'm editorializing here, how long before you think you'll be able to get a read on this between when you actually implement it and how it's working and make any adjustments? What kind of time frame will we be talking about?
Yeah, I don't want to put a number of days or months, because I think it's going to be unique to the circumstance. Some problems are going to resolve more quickly than others. Like a traffic control problem, we can resolve through enforcement. And so, that'll be easier modeled versus if you have a chronic problem with transients, for example, and that's going to be a harder nut to crack. It's going to require a deeper investment of time and energy. I can tell you on little pilot projects that have been done in the past, it's very effective, and the community sees results quickly when we've been able to assign a team to a specific problem. There's an area in South Laguna. We did this at Victoria Beach. We did this and we're doing this now at Top of the World in Alta Laguna, where we're able to provide sustained education and enforcement. And so I'm confident that it's going to manifest results very quickly, but I really don't want to tie myself into if you don't see results in 30 days, your pizza's free kind of thing. Cause I just don't know until we get the teams up and running what kind of problems we're going to assign them to work on. But I would very much like the opportunity to put a pin in this and come back to this group, hopefully when we can meet in person and say, here's a progress report.
That would be great. We'd love to, anytime that you feel it's appropriate, you let me know, and we will give you an invite to come on back, and maybe we can get those pesky electrons to work properly. But
I'd love to do it in person. I'd love to come see you all in person.
Well, we'd love to do that. We used to have our meetings at Mozambique, and with any luck, we can do it in person. We can do it there, assuming that we can open up a bit more completely. I think I have one more question here, and it says, if there is an illegal situation activity in our neighborhood, can I call you? And I think they mean you personally with the information.
You could. I would probably be the least impactful person to call when it's happening. As much as I love the town, I do not have my helicopter up and running yet to airdrop me into town. I would encourage any illegal activity be reported to our communications center, which is open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You'll always get a person. And obviously we're a 24-hour organization. Because really, I wouldn't be in a position to do anything other than to do exactly what you could do directly by calling into our comm center and have an officer dispatched. I do want to make a distinction between illegal activity that's happening right now, where we need to get out there and fix it, versus the more chronic, constant problems you might be having with either traffic or whatever. Those we're going to have these teams in place to give this information to make contact with. I'm always available to anybody in this community, but I'm frankly, if I'm being candid, I'm not the best place to start because I don't have the operational information to answer a question or a problem. It's always going to be referred to somebody that works in that area. And I don't mean that to punt. I mean, I shouldn't be your first stop. I should be your last if you're not getting the answers you need or you're not getting the results you expect or want.
Okay. I think that's we do have a couple more questions, but we're getting close to our end time here.
It was late, so I'm happy to answer as many as you have because you all had to wait for me.
Well, there's one that I know that Laguna Beach is not, because I did some research on this. It says Orange County is experiencing sharp rise in hate crimes. I don't know if that's true or not. Perhaps you would. And how can the department help combat this? I don't know what the statistics are. I got mine from the uniform crime reports from the FBI, and when I want to check on it, in the past I've called the chief and to learn what the issue may have been. There wasn't much here in Laguna Beach, but I don't know what.
No, that's correct. Hate crimes fall under very specific categories for reporting purposes. And so those crimes have to be done, certain categories have to be followed in. And so we've not seen any uptick here in town. Now it may be a lagging indicator. So it may take some time for that data to assimilate into a discernible pattern, but at present, we don't have any of those issues at the moment.
All righty, I think we're getting very close to the time when we should call a close to the meeting. I want to thank you very much for being so open and overcoming these difficulties. So it's been a pleasure to have you, and you are invited back. Just give me a call anytime that you would like to give us an update or provide information that you think would be useful to this group and to others. And in the interim, I would remind everybody that this session was recorded and it will be available to anyone who wants to take another listen into it. So Chief, I want to thank you very much and look forward to gathering in person. I am where he is. Chief, you're on mute if you wanted to give a closing remark. You can unmute yourself.
It did not allow me to unmute myself. I didn't want you all to think that I dropped off. I apologize. Yes, I did.
We just unmuted you. I don't know how that happened. But...
First off, again, thank you all for bearing with me. I apologize for being late. I want to reiterate how humbling it is to be a part of this organization and a part of this city. Thank you all for indulging me on that. Secondly, I appreciate the opportunity to come back and speak to you, but I also want to make myself available to you. So I've talked about a lot of things and it sounds great, but my hope is that you as a community will hold me accountable to those things, to providing you information, timely information, and meaningful information. So please don't wait for me necessarily to reach out to you. If there's something I can do to provide information to you or your group, reach out to me and summon me, and I shall appear and do whatever I can to make sure we have good information that we're sharing with you.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. I think that's what we would ask of a chief of police, and I think you've hit all the right notes. Again, I'm editorializing, but I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to when you can come back. And if you need anything from us, I would say if you'd like us to provide you with some support for something, give us a call. I can either contact this group by email or hold a separate meeting to discuss whatever it is we can do to help the police. The policing in the last year has been a very difficult job. We hope here in Laguna Beach that it's not a difficult job and that you are all treated with the respect that you are certainly due. So thank you very much for tonight, Chief.
Thank you all very much. Stay healthy.
You too.